Savino, we're gonna unmute you so we can check your sound.
Okay. How are you?
All right, you sound good.
Hmm.
All right, I'll hang up on you now.
All right, I'm gonna exit this.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us for tonight's community town hall discussion. I am glad to be joined by New York State Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, New York State Senator Diane Savino, and the Dean of our delegation, Assemblymember Michael Cusick. United States Senator Charles Schumer will be joining us in about an hour. It has really been a trying few months for our communities as we all have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. Our local businesses have been closed. Our young students are out of school. Parents are trying to juggle work, taking care of the family and tending to bills. Our nonprofits have taken massive funding cuts while still trying to provide essential social services for our most vulnerable populations. And also, we should not forget about the essential workers, the medical personnel, and frontline responders continuing to risk so much for the health and safety of our communities. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the passing of Reverend Maggie Howard, someone that was a beloved pastor of the Stapleton UAME Church. She was a community leader who served Staten Islanders for decades with compassion, love, and unwavering faith. She was a wonderful mother, a friend, and a guide for so many. She will be deeply missed, and her family will remain in our prayers. This year, Reverend Howard was selected as the 2020 Staten Island Advanced Woman Achievement. During a recent interview, Reverend Maggie Howard stated, "No matter what happened yesterday, tomorrow can be better if we start today." I think that speaks loudly to the times we are in, and that there is a brighter future if we continue to work together. And I really just want to take a quick moment of silence in honor of Reverend Maggie Howard. Thank you. I want to quickly just go over the format for this evening. First, each of my colleagues will have a few remarks to say, and from their, of course, representing their respective districts and how we're working together on a social and economic need of the entire state and borough. And after that, we will open the meeting for question and answers from those who wish to ask questions or make a comment. Anyone who has a question at the time will be asked to raise their hand via the Zoom function, and then you will be called on one at a time to present your questions. Please limit yourself to one question until we work through all questions on a call, and then we can circle back if folks have a second question. With that said, I want to open the floor to New York State Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, who has been a tremendous leader and also has visited Staten Island a couple of times, one for my inauguration, and also when we went to visit the Empire Outlets. He toured the bus rapid transit section, as well as Snug Harbor, Curtis High School, and so much more. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for joining us. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Charles. So greetings, everybody from the other forgotten borough of the Bronx. I just want to say hello to all my friends on Staten Island. First, let me say you have wonderful representatives in the Assembly and in the Senate. I'm talking about the Democrats, of course. And you made a wise and great choice in Charles Fall. He is representing Staten Island in a magnificent way, working well with Mr. Cusick and also Senator Diane Savino to make sure that Staten Island gets its fair share. So, as Charles has mentioned, this has been one of the most difficult years I think any of us have ever seen, and we're only halfway through. So I hope it gets better. No one had any idea that the COVID crisis was going to hit. No one had any idea of the stuff that was going to happen around the murder of George Floyd. Those type of situations that have really brought into focus a lot of things for the legislature to have to handle. We had to go to Albany to deal with the COVID crisis. We also had to go to Albany to deal with these others. But session officially, I should say unofficially ended on June 2nd, but I can imagine at some point, and I know that Senator Schumer is coming on later. I'm hoping that the federal government is able to give us some resources because if not, the state is facing about an $8 billion shortfall, and none of us in the legislature want to have to deal with the downside of what happened if the federal government doesn't give us assistance in terms of resources for us to bring back, so that we don't have to look to make cuts in programs that we care about. Again, the only two ways to deal with the shortfall. This is like, your household budget. Either you get more money or you gotta, cut spending. And so we're hoping that the federal government helps us out so that we don't have to face, those difficult choices. So I'm happy to be here. Again, I'm happy to be here with Mike and Diane, and of course our host Charles. And I'll take questions.
Sorry, I had a hard time hearing the last few parts, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry. Would you? I don't know if anybody else. Can you repeat the
Were
last?
people able to hear me?
The last three sentences. I think the last three sentences we weren't able to hear.
Can people hear me now? Wave if you can hear me. Okay. So what I said was I'm happy to be here with, of course, Mike and Diane, and of course our host Charles. And I said, I'll wait for others' statements, and I'm happy to.
Okay, so if anybody has a question for the speaker, can you please, raise your hand? If you don't have it, no, I mean the hand raise function. I saw you. What's his name? And you will be unmuted.
Could I ask a question? Nithya Chatterjee?
Mr. Speaker, is it okay if we could just actually let my other colleagues speak really quickly, and then we'll get into the Q&A if that's all right with you, if you have some time?
Sure.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it. Next, I'd like to introduce and open the floor to the Dean of our delegation on Staten Island, Mr. Michael Cusick, Assemblyman Michael Cusick, who anytime I have a question, whether it's at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he's always accessible and very appreciative of his friendship and all that he has done for Staten Island since he's been in office, and also since I've been there as a member of the Assembly. Mr. Cusick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charles. I want to thank you for having this. This is a great town hall. This vehicle that we're using, particularly in these times. It's been a pleasure working with you this last year and a half. You have worked very hard for the people of Staten Island, and for that I'm grateful, because it's great to have a partner like you helping the people of Staten Island. I want to welcome our speaker. Yes, he's been to Staten Island many times. This is his first, I think, historic virtual trip to Staten Island. So I got a smile out of him. So I want to thank him for coming today for this town hall. Carl, we really appreciate all your hard work, particularly in the last couple of weeks. It's tough being the leader, and you make us all proud. So thank you for your hard work on all our behalves. and for the people of Staten Island. Again, I want to thank Diane Savino for being here also and working with us as a team up in Albany. And we do, this last couple of weeks, we've been working as a team, as a unit, to make sure that we are protecting the people of Staten Island, and it's been a pleasure to do that. Again, I want to just say that in these times, these difficult times that we have in Staten Island and in the state of New York, as Charles had mentioned earlier, it's important that we all work together for a common goal. And I know that our delegation that's here on this call today is doing that every day. Many of you are represented in the Assembly by Charles and Diane. I represent the West Shore Mid-Island of Staten Island. And in that, though, I team up many times with Diane and Charles to make sure that the North Shore and the Mid-Island and all of Staten Island is represented and resources are brought to this great place that we call home. So again, I look forward to this forum. I look forward to hearing concerns of the constituents, and I look forward to serving everyone here tonight. So thank you. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Assemblymember Cusick. Now, next, I would like to open the floor to Senator Diane Savino. If you have been to her Albany office, you will know that she puts Michael Jordan's championship closet room to shame with all the bills that she has up on her wall. So, Senator Savino, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charles. One day you will have as many bills on your walls as I do. Trust me. You are an incredibly talented young legislator. I want to thank Assemblyman, I'm calling him Senator, Assemblyman Charles Fall for hosting this virtual town hall, of course, the Dean, and my good friend, the Speaker, Carl Heastie. I've known Carl Heastie longer than I think anybody here. He and I both, yes, I've known him longer than you, Mike. When I was at DC 37 and I was the political director for my union, and he was a member and he was running for state assembly. And I remember he came before us for an endorsement. It's been that long. And I knew then that he was going to do great things. It's been an incredibly challenging year. I don't need to tell anybody here the difficulties of, we started the year with a financial crisis that has only gotten worse. Finding ourselves in the middle of a pandemic, and now the demand for social justice. And we have tried to meet those demands in a way that none of us ever thought we would. We've managed to deliver the people's justice and do the people's business without being in the same room. And those challenges are because we've had great leadership, both in the Assembly under Speaker Heastie and in the New York State Senate under the leadership of Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. They found a way to get us to a place where we could consider legislation that had long been stalled and make decisions and vote on bills and come to consensus when we couldn't even be in the same space. And we did it because we realized how important those things were. And we have tremendous obstacles coming up. The Speaker touched on it. If we don't get money from Washington, we're going to be faced with some incredibly difficult challenges and decisions that we will have to make going forward. We only have so much money, and our economy is not returning as quickly as we would like it to. How we get our economy back up and running is going to determine what we're able to do going forward in the future, how we pay for the things that we all care about: education, healthcare, investing in our communities, economic opportunity and development, housing. And so we really need our partners in Washington, and then we need to be smart about the decisions we make. And so I look forward to these conversations with our constituents and our colleagues in government, because sometimes the best ideas come from the community, doesn't always come from those of us who are elected. So thank you for hosting this, Assemblyman Fall, and now I guess it's time to hear from the people.
I just have a few more remarks before we get to the questions. Just one second. All right, yeah, so, thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. As I mentioned, this has been a challenging time for so many families. Our city, state, and country has had to take extreme measures, as was mentioned by my colleagues, in an attempt to protect the health and safety of our communities. But none of these decisions were made lightly or without undesirable consequences. However, the governor actually reported earlier today that phase 2 is scheduled to open on June 22nd, which means that barbershops and hair salons, restaurants can have outdoor dining, administrative services, commercial building management, real estate services, etc. Will open come Monday if we're still on track. And many of the issues that I know many folks will raise today will likely highlight the impact and hardship that many of folks in our community has faced in a result of this pandemic. However, the reality is that for too many people, this pandemic has only further revealed a history of economic hardship, social injustice, and health disparities that has plagued our society for decades. We hear from the small businesses and residents alike that are eager to reopen, but the risks remain unknown. And because of this, we must continue to act based on data and recommendations from medical professionals. And I'll give you an example. On April 8th, on the highest point that we saw at Richmond University Medical Center for COVID cases was 218. As of June 15th, we only have 19 COVID cases, which is tremendous, and which means that a lot of us are doing, our part here, and we have to continue to play the course. My colleagues and I on this call, we can all speak to a consistent effort, and as a lot of them mentioned, of the importance of working together. Some of the things that we've done as a unit include freezing the tolls for Staten Island residents, which was significant. The discount, and as well as making sure that the city takes responsibility for sidewalks that have been uplifted by a tree. It's no longer the homeowner's responsibility, it's the city's responsibility. When a city MD urgent care facility closed down, it was actually a bipartisan effort between all my colleagues here and throughout the island to get it back open. And I actually introduced legislation so an urgent care center does not close during a pandemic anywhere throughout the state, not only on Staten Island, but anywhere throughout the state. A couple of weeks ago, we worked to pass the Emergency Rent Relief Act of 2020, which directs $100 million from the Federal CARES Act toward rental assistance for vulnerable tenants. We instituted a price gouging ban on personal protective equipment that was and remains desperately needed by our hospitals, nursing homes, and other healthcare facilities. I recently introduced a bill, A10476, which would provide line of duty sick leave for first responders who are diagnosed with or display symptoms of the pandemic virus in any future events. Most recently, the legislature proudly passed the Say Their Name, as was mentioned by the speaker earlier, and Mike and Diane, which is a criminal justice reform agenda, which was signed by the governor last week. And these bills and recent peaceful protests have provided an opportunity for essential discussions on a state of police-community relations and how we make transparent changes toward a just future. As it relates to the New York State budget, in past years, my colleagues and I have more flexibility to advocate for funds to be directly channeled into our districts for community resources and programming. And that also included securing a number of funds for our schools throughout the North Shore and rest of the island. So with that being said, I know the speaker has another engagement, but I do want to open it up to for questions. If anybody has a question for the speaker before he heads out, again, please use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, and then we will call on you.
Yeah. Hello, good evening. This is Assemblyman Charles for I think I'm very happy that you had such a lovely get together over the air. I want to ask the speaker one question, if that's possible, and that is, by this time, has the state arrived at a figure which is this real deficit or somewhere close to what the real deficit is in terms of dollars?
Okay, so it started out at about 13 billion.
Yes,
And
sir.
between certain actions that the governor took, looking at some reserves, some money that came in terms of settlements. So that $13 billion deficit has been probably reduced down to $8 billion. And so if we don't get help from the federal government, like I said, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to have to cut or you're going to have to raise revenue. And, you know, raising revenue in the middle of a year is pretty difficult, particularly when it comes to taxes, because tax changes have to take effect at the beginning of the year. So it'll be a difficult thing. I'm having faith in our congressional representatives to do the right thing. The House has done the right thing. Your Congressman Max Rose has done the right thing in passing a bill that would give the New York State resources to help not only just the state of New York, but also the city of New York to replace the revenue that the city will have lost. But I would say the state has about an $8 billion deficit, and the city has about a $4 billion deficit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I don't see anything else. Right? Any questions? Good. Okay.
Is somebody asking a question?
Somebody else. I see we got a question from, what was it again? Mr. Bobby Deji. Bobby, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, all. I appreciate you putting this together. All protocol observed. My question basically, and I've written into the chat, is Black and brown organizations in the borough especially are going to be hard hit, and some are going to face closure post COVID-19. In terms of, you know, the health disparities, we know about the funding gaps. Even on the city count and the city level, we know that funding has been cut for youth programs and so on and so forth. You all understand this. My question is, what plans or measures, if any, are put in place to provide support for Black and brown cultural institutions? I'm an executive director and founder of Canvas Institute. I know that many empowerment zones here, there's a group of us who have formed a coalition of recent, and we are really looking to see how we can get support so that we can sustain the programs and continue to service the populations that rely and depend on our services. So are there grants, funding programs, support that you all have been considering or have put together? Thank you.
Well, let me talk in general, and then maybe Mike, Charles, and Diane can talk more locally. I think one of the offshoots that has happened from this Black Lives Matter movement has been people asking for a shuffling of the deck of the priorities of how government spends their money, with the talk and discussion of the defund the police, which, like I said, the outtake I take from that is we don't want to have no police, which would be chaos. But I think people want to see more spending on more social programs, more spending in our youth. And I think that's something that we would all support. But can we do that right now, today? Again, we're going to need some help from the federal government because, as I mentioned before, right now we're facing an $8 billion budget deficit. So it's hard to do new spending when you have to cover up an $8 billion spending. But I do think, when things kind of get to a more normal pace in space when it comes to financing, I think you will see a reprioritization of trying to deal with the other places where there's been racial disparities. So now I'll turn it to your local representatives to talk on more local issues.
And I think the speaker's absolutely right on that. So number one, anything that had been previously approved in the state budget is still there. We haven't instituted any reductions or any cuts to things that had been approved and voted on and adopted. Now, that's not to say that if we don't get funding from Washington, that those decisions might not have to be relooked at, because there's a very distinct possibility that could happen. There's a different set of decisions that are being made at the city council level. The city budget is due within 2 weeks. And there's a big discussion around at the city level of how to fund particular programs. Part of that is the utilizing some of the funding that normally goes into policing and putting it into more community-based social services. I mean, someone recently said, I don't remember who it was, but it was kind of profound, that every agency failure leads to an unnecessary 911 call. And there's something to be said about that, that if we adequately invested in community-based organizations like the ones Bobby is talking about, and we adequately invested in social services, you wouldn't have so many unnecessary encounters with the police. Police aren't social workers. They're not supposed to handle some of these cases. So we have an opportunity with the city budget. What we need to do, I think, looking at the state budget, is thinking what we do next year, depending on how much money we have, re-examining the kind of programs that we invest in. But for the programs that have already been funded, they're not targeted to be cut yet, but depending on what happens with money from Washington, that could change, unfortunately.
Right. And just to follow up on Carl and Diane, I'm very interested in the second half of this forum, hearing from Senator Schumer, because he'll give us a take on what's happening in Washington, right now, because it changes every day. What amount the state could be getting. We could be getting nothing. We could be getting something, and it's really important that the federal government is there for New York. And that is something that we need for this budget, as Diane mentioned, but more locally, to address the issue of businesses who have been devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our delegation has already been meeting and talking about problem areas, particularly businesses. And that's why Charles having this town hall is important for all of us, because we get to find out the specific businesses that we need to put on the list to focus on and to go forward, as we can do this year. As Diane said, the budget's already baked in, but we can try to help out as much as we can this year, leading into what we need for next year's budget.
I echo, everything that my colleague said, and the only thing I'll add to that is I think the importance too of, there was such a I feel like a good job done by those that have done peaceful protesting to make sure that we see reforms from a legislative side of things. And I think there has to be a connection to the budget too, right? So instead of like, I know one of the biggest things that the city council does every year is $1 million for discretionary funding, so why is that $1 million? Why can't that be $20 million? And why can't the public make a decision on how that money's being spent? Because when you look at the work that Bobby's doing and the cure violence groups are doing, True to Life, etc., it makes a significant impact and difference in our community. And if those programs were adequately funded, we'll see a significant improvement in our community. So, but good question, Bobby. Thank you. Who's next? Jennifer Bromsky.
Good evening, all. I want to take this time to extend my thanks and appreciation to Assemblyman for office for putting this community event together. And I also want to thank all of the community leaders on this line. I bring you greetings from the NYC Census 2020, the largest peace mobilization of our time. The largest peace mobilization of our time. And I'm just going to take 2 minutes to tell you that I heard everyone talking about money, how we can bring resources into our community. While there is still work to be done, we hit a major milestone in New York City. Right now, Staten Island is at 57.7% with the census. The census takes place every 10 years, and the funding we're talking about is $675 billion at stake. And that money comes to our community every 10 years. It also determines congressional seats, how many congressional seats we get in the state of New York. We are set to lose a congressional seat if the people are not counted. There are about 141,000 foreign born in New York, on Staten Island, and we need to count those people. In 2010, less than 50% of the children on Staten Island were undercounted. In Washington Heights, when the census result was over, they got a congressional seat in the new school. I'm here to tell you today that there is no immigration question on the census. There is no citizen question on the census. It takes 10 minutes and it determines how much we're gonna get in 10 years. I'm asking everyone on this line, take up your phone and go to my 2020 census.gov. If we do not fill out the census, we're gonna lose the money for healthcare, for senior citizens for the next 10 years. And the children that are 5 years old today, if they do not fill out, we do not include them on the census, we will not be able to count those kids until 2030, and those kids will be 10 years old and will lose out on new schools, after school programs, and the funding that Bobby DJ was talking about that come from the city, it comes from the federal to the state and to our different communities, and we're gonna lose part of that $750 billion, and it's gonna go to other states when it should come to New York to take care of the services that we need. COVID-19, they determine how many funding goes to health services in our community. Food stamp, natural houses, So all of those things, and right now, the Black and brown community on Staten Island are 40% and 37%, and Staten Island is at 57%. So I'm appealing to every one of us, please go to my 2020 census.gov, text it to your neighbor, your friends, so that we can complete the census. Thank you.
So I just want to interrupt. I'm sorry. I have to run, everybody, but I hope everybody stays safe and is doing well out on Staten Island. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciate it. And just to add to what Jennifer said, so we actually added $20 million in the state budget, for community organizations to help out with the census outreach. One of the biggest messages that we're amplifying out there, if you already have filled out the census, if you can right now, text 10 to 15 people in your phone book and encourage them to fill it out. And if they haven't filled it out, do the same thing, because it's very important, as Jennifer mentioned, the amount of funding that's tied into it, and we want to make sure that our community is not undercounted. All right, so who is next? Jacqueline?
Hi, thank you, Jennifer, for speaking about the census, because I myself am a census navigator and I wanted to speak to it specifically because we're talking about the budget right now. And I just wanted to point out that New York's self-response rate was 62% in 2010. So what that means is that 38% of funding that we need to keep our city running, we never received from the federal government. So I am also urging you all to encourage your family and friends, add something to your email signature, make a Facebook post, tweet about the census, because it's urgent, as we see right now in this moment, to increase the self-response rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And just reading a comment from Dawn Marie on Facebook, yes, I agree. Accountability is very important. Dawn, thank you for that comment. Any questions, please raise your hand on the Zoom feature. We also have a number of questions too that we received prior, but I figured we let folks answer here that may have before we get into those questions for folks that couldn't make it but wanted to. So Dana has a question. Dana, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, so I am a dual certified speech language pathologist as well as a teacher of students with speech and language disabilities, and I specialize in early childhood and autism. The reason why I'm talking about this is because I know there's been a lot of political pressure and pressure in general from since the executive order was put out regarding the D75 schools and the special needs schools as well. I was wondering, because summer school's 2 weeks away, and I know there's been a lot of conversations about it, but a lot of the issues that we're seeing with the kids that are happening at home, which is the push for the children to return to school in person, are the things that would make social distancing and everything difficult as well. They have sensory issues, they have a lot of needs that require hand-over-hand assistance. Has there been any conversation with the people who work directly with these children? Because a lot of, even like my colleagues who work with older children or ones who are not quite as severe, they were kind of surprised when I specified all the stuff to them that could be a potential issue. And it's not impossible, but I think that there's something that maybe could be brought to the table from my colleagues and myself.
Dana, just so I understand your question correctly, you're saying basically 2 weeks from now, summer school for folks in District 75 is going to be starting. And I guess the concern is, what protocols have in place, or if there's been any discussion on whether or not they've taken into account people like yourselves or other folks that may be out there that may have to deal directly with kids that are in D75?
Well, so kind of. So yes, I know that it's not been decided yet on whether it would be in person or remote learning. I know that that was left up to the districts, but I know there's been a little bit more of a push since the executive order has been signed. But the question is more if there is conversations going on with people who work directly with the kids we're talking about. Because I mean, my colleagues are a little bit concern for, their own families, but also we're concerned about our kids, especially with the multi-inflammatory syndrome and everything. These are very vulnerable kids as it is. They cannot communicate when they're sick, or a lot of them can't at least. So just for their own protection and everything, is that something that is in the conversation?
Gotcha. So Dana, I can't speak for the executive or the governor's office, but we can definitely check in with them. But I do know I have family members that have brought this to my attention, and I don't think we heard back from their office yet on our inquiry, but we can definitely follow up with you on an update. And I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on here. It's
Sure. Yeah, if I could, Charles. Yeah, Dana, thank you. We used you as a resource a lot in our office on this issue. Yes, ultimately it's a decision made by the executive and his staff based on the executive orders. But the three of us have been working with the agencies involved because we do get a lot of parents and family who are contacting us. So we have been working with the state to come up with a plan. I know that our office has been working with the agency to come up with a plan that is it's more succinct for the parents. The parents are confused, and so there needs to be a definite layout of a plan for them to know what they're doing. And I see you shaking your head, and that's the big issue we're getting from parents. So that's what we're working with the agency right now to come up with, and we'll get you in the loop also. We have some agencies out here in Staten Island who we've been putting in contact with the state to try to come up with. I can't answer, as my colleagues can't, for the governor's office on this, of what their exact plan is going to be, but we all have been chiming in on some sort of suggestions that we think would work, particularly out here in Staten Island, which is a little different than the rest of the city when it comes to this issue. My colleagues?
I can't add any more than that. I will tell you what we all better start thinking about is September. Not forget about for District 75 kids, but for the entire school system, because we still don't have an answer as to whether or not we're going to go to half day, full day, 1 week in, 1 week off.
Right.
What are parents supposed to do? Are you going to work 1 week and work 1 week off? How are we going to handle childcare? So if you're a parent and you have to go back to work and your child is only going to go to school 1 week on and 1 week off, how are we going to handle the issue of childcare? This is going to be extraordinarily expensive for parents if they have to pay for full-time childcare and go back to work. So these are going to be, we're going to have to figure this out over the summer while the mayor and the governor think that they don't want anything to go back to normal. But we have to have some answers for people between now and September. I mean, I don't know what people are doing now. Thank God I don't have any kids. I don't know how people are handling this, but it's not going to get better if we don't have a real clear answer for parents by September.
Absolutely. And, as mentioned earlier, right, like we want to also make sure that whatever plan that we do is a responsible plan and we're not going backwards, right? Just yesterday it was 60,000 tests done and less than 1% of the people tested positive throughout the state, which is huge progress. And we're seeing what's happening in other states when they are not, following the appropriate guidelines, how it's skyrocketing over there. So, but hear you loud and clear, Dana. And we'll definitely follow up with you. And thank you again because I remember, we did speak about this before, and thank you for bringing it up again on this forum. Next question. Anybody have a question? And just a reminder, this town hall is not specific to any particular issue. Whatever question you may have, we want to keep it very general. Please let us know. Any questions, please use the raise hand feature on the Zoom raise hand feature. Same thing, right? Monique has a question. Thank you for joining us, Monique.
Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me now?
I hear you.
We can hear. Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you so much for organizing this. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what the conversation is to support our elderly and senior citizens post-COVID. I know a lot of them have been struggling. It's been a financial burden for a lot of people that are on fixed incomes. And I was hoping that you could speak just a little bit about what the post-COVID world would look like in supporting our senior citizens.
Thank you, Monique, for that question. So one of the things that we did a couple of weeks ago, we added $100 million to the rent relief package. So for those that are struggling to pay their rent, you know, there is some level of relief out there that would be helpful for them. And another thing too, we're really focused on too, is now the mental health aspect of it, because this was a time where, of course, many folks weren't permitted in senior homes, and we're going to make sure that our senior population has the resources that they need, especially when it comes to that. You know, being lonely in nursing homes or wherever they may be could be very difficult. You know, so that's you know, 2 points I could definitely speak to. I don't know if you know, Diana might wants to chime in on this one. But is there anything in particular that, you know, you feel like government should be doing more of, that you saw that is lacking, or you know?
I was, no, the mental health aspect is really what I was kind of getting at here. I take care of an elderly family member, and you know, they've been kind of isolated and definitely reaching out, and they don't quite understand why family, you know, can't come and see them. It doesn't really click for them, you know, the danger of COVID at this point. So, you know, the mental health aspect of it and what we can do to support them as, you know, nursing homes begin to reopen, and, you know, what resources nursing homes are going to have for that population.
Well, the other thing that's been missing for seniors who aren't necessarily living in nursing homes, but those who are somewhat mobile, is the closure of senior centers. A lot of seniors get their socialization through the senior center network. And it's also a place where the senior centers and the staff there are the first people to see when a senior begins to suffer from either poor health conditions, or they recognize that there's something going on. They're showing up where their you know, their hygiene begins to suffer, and they notice things sometimes before family members do. So that is something that's been missing in the lives of a lot of seniors because they had to close them all. Also, there's been a disruption in the food delivery to a lot of seniors. Not every senior gets Meals on Wheels. They don't need it, but they were getting food from other sources, senior centers being one of them. So there's this food insecurity that opened up among a lot of seniors, and we've been trying to fill those gaps. But you're right, seniors have been particularly vulnerable during COVID because, one, they're more likely and more susceptible to get it. The isolation that occurred as a result of them being separated from their natural social settings and the ability to interact with people like themselves. If they were in a nursing home or assisted living, they couldn't have their family come and visit them. Friday, the governor is lifting the ban on family members visiting in nursing homes and in hospitals. So for the first time, family will be able to come and visit. But yeah, we've seen how a pandemic like this can really do serious damage to seniors. And this pandemic is not over. The immediate crisis may have lifted, but it's going to be with us for a while. And if we don't adjust our behavior accordingly, it could come back in a very severe way. So hopefully we have learned something, but the way we handle, you know, seniors, and particularly socially isolated seniors, is very important, Monique. Thank you for raising that point.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the only thing I'll add to that, thank you, Senator, is, you know, the city does have a food program for seniors, so, and they will deliver it. So for more information on that, call 311 or visit nysc.gov. But there is a free delivery program for the seniors to get them food if they are in need. So thank you for that question, Monique. Next question. Fran, you're unmuted. Thank you for joining
Okay,
us.
good. Thank you. In response to the issue about food, I understand when you say go call 311. We hear it, we're on Zoom, we're involved, we know what's going on, and there's a certain number of people that we could reach out to. And I talk to people on community board, I talk to people all through Zoom on other groups that I belong to, but how do you get it to a senior who feels completely isolated, doesn't know their elbow from their nose about what they should be doing? They don't want to get themselves put into a nursing home because now if they call 311, does that mean that there's another problem? And I think the lack of good nutrition aids and abets any of these viruses or flus to our vulnerable seniors. And so I think one of the bigger issues is about getting them good nutrition, but how do they know about it? How do they get that information so that they can actually receive the things that they need to be able to feel better and feel strong enough to fight off a virus? You know, when things are being said about, you go to a nutritionist, if you're lucky enough to go to a nutritionist or to a doctor who could share with you, well, you know, squirt zinc up your nose, use Zicam, do this, do that, to help yourself. If these seniors aren't hearing this and they're watching the Hallmark channel and they're talking about all these things and how they can die from taking blah, 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 they don't want to take any other medicine and they're not going to talk to anybody else. So how do you get the word out? How do you get the word to them? You got to know where they all are.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Fran. So my understanding from the city is that any senior centers or any areas that seniors were coming together at have been working closely with their population or groups of seniors to get them the food. That's one way that we're familiar with. And I also do know that we have been putting out on our weekly email addresses on information on where how that could be helpful or where people can get food to seniors. And I believe we even did a mailer on this, so because I understand it's also a number of different ways to communicate. So we recognize that email is just not the end all be all there. But I hear you loud and clear, and we are doing everything we can. If there's something better you think we should be doing with our outreach, let us know. Maybe one of the things we can explore is a robocall, probably that we could do just to let folks know where they can get seniors food for seniors. All right, so thank you, Fran. We have been joined by yes, Mike.
I'd just like to just chime in on your comment too, to add to what Charles said too, Fran. Along with the agencies, Charles' office gets a lot of phone calls from constituents who might have an elderly aunt or mother that is homebound, and then they call our offices. So a tool like tonight is very important in that, call our offices or tell people that you're associated with that they could call their elected officials also, because we do have the resources and the tools to get to folks, whether it's through an agency, a city or state, or one of the great agencies here on Staten Island, like Staten Island Meals on Wheels. Because they have so many clients, they just don't go and deliver meals, they go and check in on folks too. And so I know our office has dealt with them a lot in checking in on people. And I know that all our offices are proactive when it comes to the constituent part of this office, in that we do some reach out too. We have seniors that we're all associated with, where our individual offices will reach out and ask, how you doing? Do you need anything? The big thing right now, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree, is PPE, right? We're delivering a lot of masks to seniors. Sending them to their house. Staffers will go and drop it in their mailbox. But I would suggest anybody on this call to reach out to any one of us if you know of specific seniors, and we can certainly get them the services that they need. Thanks, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. We have been joined by our United States Minority Leader, Charles Schumer. Thank you so much, Senator, for joining us. Very happy to see you, and thank you for fighting the good fight in Washington. We understand it's not easy, but we're really appreciative for all your efforts. Thank you, Senator. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Charles. And first, let me thank you for letting me join this meeting. Let me thank you for doing the great job you do in Staten Island, a place I love very much. Now that we're going down to Washington, I don't fly. I used to go to Staten Island every other week, and then with COVID, I didn't go. But now I'm driving through Staten Island to go down to Washington on Monday nights, and Thursday nights I come back home, and I rush home because living with us, the only good part of this COVID crisis is that you can be with family. So my little story is, I was in Washington doing the COVID bill, the one that got us all this help, the $3 trillion. I finished negotiating with Secretary Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, at 9:30. We voted at 11. I had been away from my family for 2.5 weeks, and COVID was raging. So I rushed up to our apartment in Brooklyn, driving through over the Goethals Bridge, over Verrazano, and I was there holed up for 6 weeks because we couldn't go out. But who was I living with? 4 other human beings. My wife, of course, my daughter and son-in-law, because they have a small apartment. They came to live with us, but they brought my 16-month-old grandson. So I spent 6 weeks with little Noah, and I can't think of another circumstance where that would have happened. So for any of us who don't have COVID in our family, one of the joys here is it brings family together. I'm working so hard. I sleep about 3-4 hours a night, but my most exhausting hour this is Senator Warner saying, let's go eat later. I got to call it 8 to 10. I got in a meeting.
Well, we can have go out to an outdoor cafe for 30 minutes. I'm here till 7.
Okay, goodbye. I'm booked up. I got to talk. This is Assemblyman, come here, Senator Warner from Virginia. This is our great Assemblyman, a rising star on Staten Island, Charles Fall. And there is one of my former employees who's now the leader of the Staten Island Assembly delegation.
Don't get close. Don't get close.
Mike Cusick.
All right, well, keep him straight. And tell him he needs to go out and have like a quick glass of wine with me.
He knows good wine. Anyway, so I'm sleeping only 3 hours a night or so, but my most exhausting hour is the hour each day I was assigned. Each of us was assigned an hour to chase Noah around the house. And boy, that was exhausting. Our house isn't baby-proofed, because the kids are old and out of the house. So he'd take the books off the bookshelves, he'd go into the closet and bang on the pots and pans. The only time I got in trouble, my wife had some china that she had inherited through her great-grandmother, and he got into that china drawer while my back was turned, and he broke 2 plates, and as I in the doghouse. But other than that, everything was all right. And before I get into the substance, the serious substance here, Charles, I got some good news. The Richmond University Medical Center, we're always working to help bring federal money to Staten Island. They just got a $30 million grant from FEMA. They were hurt in Superstorm Sandy. They were hurt in COVID. They really needed help. And this $30 million grant came through just a few hours ago. So if anyone from the Advance is listening, you can write that up. It's news, making news here. And Max Rose helped us with, I don't know if Max is on the call, but Max Rose helped us. We try to work as a team. Is he on, Charles? Is he on the call, Max?
No, he couldn't join us, unfortunately, today. But
Okay. Well, thank him too. Okay, we also got money, as you know, in COVID for Staten Island Ferry. I went out of my way to make sure Staten Island Ferry would get some money. Are people using it again? How crowded is it these days?
Yeah, just during the COVID crisis, it did significantly decrease. Ridership did significantly decrease, but as time passed by, ridership is starting to slowly increase, but it's
good.
The biggest way to get it in Manhattan, of course.
Okay, so let me tell you what's going on in DC. I know you asked me to go over a whole bunch of subjects, which I'll try to do. In the first, I want to talk a little bit about the Justice in Policing Act. We've all seen the horrible murder of George Floyd and so many others. And so we put together, led by Cory Booker, senator from across the Kilvan Cull in New Jersey, and Kamala Harris and the House Black Caucus, we put together a very strong bill that is getting broad support. And what it includes is no more no-knock warrants, no more chokeholds, no racial profiling, and accountability are the strongest things in this bill. And if this bill were to pass, we would really have a great reduction in the kind of situations we have seen now. You know, there's something called a few bad apples, and you got to root out the few bad apples in any organization, including the police. And this bill helps that get done in a good, fair, good way. So I hope people will support that bill. That's not what I was asked to talk about, but I thought I ought to mention it because there's, you know, there's so much going on here. But let me talk about what we got into the CARES bill. When President Trump and McConnell, the leader of the Senate, first put together the bill, it didn't help out working people. It was mainly for the big corporations. They got a $400 billion slush fund to get money. So we Democrats, from the most liberal, Bernie Sanders, to the most conservative, Joe Manchin, and everyone in between, as minority leader, I was honored to lead the group. We said, we got to help average people. So here's what's in the bill. It's very important. First, in the bill is what's called pandemic unemployment insurance. If you lose your job because of COVID, the federal government will pay your full salary up to $75,000 a year. If you make more than 75, you get paid most of your salary. Retroactive from March 20th, even if you haven't applied, all the way to July 31st, and now we're trying to get it renewed to December 31st. Now, a lot of people, when they first apply, and by the way, it applies to everybody. You don't have to be a traditional unemployed worker. You could be a gig worker. You could be a part-time worker. You could be a sole proprietor. You know, you own your own little business. All of this, and you can get this money. And when people first applied, when it first started, frankly, it wasn't working well. New York State's unemployment offices were not geared up for such a huge number. We have so many unemployed people. But they now have geared up. So if you've been rejected once or twice, please tell everyone on our call, and please tell everybody you know. You can apply again, and you'll get the money. It'll go back to March 20th. And I'm sure Assemblyman Fall, Assemblyman Cusick, any of your elected officials can help you with this. That was number one. Number two, we got a huge amount of money for our hospitals and healthcare centers. They were hurting, including Richmond, including all of our, Staten Island, all of our hospitals were hurting. And we got them a lot of money so they could put in more doctors, more nurses, get PPE. And, you know, they weren't allowed to do regular medical stuff, so they were losing all that money. We got $150 billion. We got money for state and local government. We need much more, and in the new COVID bill, we're trying to get a much more. But we got $150 billion. That went, New York State got $10 billion. Charles was up in Albany, and Mike was up in Albany. They used some of that money to help people who got evicted from their homes, I think, this week. We also got $1 billion for education, so they wouldn't have to cut it in New York. We got $1 billion for higher education. University of Staten Island got some of that. Wagner College got some of that. So that was in there. But the second biggest thing, and we also said you can't be evicted if you lose your job. You can't get evicted from your apartment till July 24th. And now we're going to try to extend that. And if you own your own home and you couldn't pay your mortgage, they got to give you forbearance till December 31st. So that was good. We also put in this bill, we put limits on the big corporate lending so that what the president wanted to do is he wanted to give big, huge loans to big companies with no accountability. No one would know who got the money and why. We made them require that every loan they make be made public, the whole loan document, every loan rejected, and a nice little provision for we Democrats and everybody who wants fairness. We said President Trump couldn't use any of this money himself. No high government elected official could dip into this pot. If Trump was allowed to do it, all the money would go to hotels and golf courses and stuff like that. Okay. So we did that. But probably the most important thing here for Staten Island that I'd like to talk about is the PPP, the money for small businesses. Staten Island is a place of small businesses. Chamber of Commerce always comes and visits. Some of you guys are with me. Cusick sometimes comes down on those visits. And we know that businesses under 500 were hurting. So we said that every business under 500 could get its employees paid. Now it's through December 31st. for any 8-week period. They extended it. It was June 30th. Now it's December 31st. They could get 40% more than your employee's salary to pay for rent, to pay for, a mortgage, to pay for utilities, for those other costs. When this program was rolled out, it was a mess. Businesses applied and were rejected. If you didn't have a banker, no one helped you apply. It's all changed now. There's new money just for small businesses. And there's something called community development financial institutions and minority development institutions, which can help you get the money. So make sure, we'll give the names of these groups. Their goal is to find the small businesses and help them apply and get the money from the Small Business Administration. I'll get to Charles, to Mike, to any of the other. I don't know if Diane or anybody else is on the phone here. On the Zoom, we don't do phone anymore, we do Zoom.
Senator, we have State Senator Diane Savino with us as well. And
yes,
Speaker
so
Carl E.
Diane, hello Diane. I'm not seeing your pickup there. But in any case, we'll get you the names of these groups. If you didn't get the money, you can. And again, it's retroactive. Here's what else I did. I made sure nonprofits could get this money. So if you're a nonprofit, you're eligible. And again, the CDFIs and the MDIs and the other institutions will help you. Again, people were rejected because it was so screwed up the first time. The money went to the big boys. If you knew a banker in a fancy bank, you got the money. If you were a little guy, you didn't. Now you get it. But second, I also included churches because I knew our churches were hurting. Why? Where's their income come from? Well, a collection plate. No one's going to church, no collection plate. So for churches, synagogues, mosques, they can apply. And please spread the word, Charles, Mike, and others among the pastors. And I got the Catholic Church and the parishes were able to get it as well. Originally, they said the parishes couldn't get it. And because they were part of a big organization, the Roman Catholic Church. We said if you have 500 employees or less in the parish, you can get it. So Cardinal Dolan was very, very grateful, and he supposedly spread the word to all the parishes here on Staten Island. But if you're in a parish, ask your priest, ask your pastor. If they haven't applied, they can get it. If you're in a Protestant church, ask your pastor. Make sure they apply. And the money can pay their salary, can pay the cost of employees, can help pay rent and utilities. Our churches are a mainstay. They're needed now more than ever. Many of them do social services, senior citizens, food banks, things like that. And they provide the spiritual guidance that's needed now more than ever. So that's available as well. So there's lots of things there. We're fighting in the new Heroes Bill to get more than we have. But there's a lot of help for people, and not everyone here on Staten Island's taking advantage of it. So I'm glad I had this opportunity to let people know. We're putting money in the new bill for the post office. That can't go broke. If you're a frontline worker, firefighter, police officer, hospital worker, bus driver, we have a provision that gives a little extra money to people who have fairly lower salaries. So that's a good thing too. So please apply for these things. Call my office, Charles's office, Mike's office, Diane's office, Max Rose's office, and we will help you with all this. That's the story, Charles.
Thank you so much, Senator. Very good news. A lot of good news from coming from
Can I say one more thing before I sign off?
Sure, absolutely.
So people are wondering about the future in New York. Will we survive? We're a densely populated area. We depend on mass transit. Well, you know, I was around, as Mike Cusick knows. I think you were working for. Were you working for me on 9/11, Mike Cusick? He's on mute.
Yes, Chuck, I was working for you.
Yeah, Mike was working in my Senate office then, before he became a big shot. And I was on the pile with George Bush, W. Bush, where we all came together in a very bipartisan way. And everyone in the next 6 months said, New York's finished. We're the target. No one's going to move below Canal Street. No one's going to want to be below Canal, work there. All the businesses would move out to be away from the target in New York. Well, look what happened. We came back bigger and better and stronger than ever. I believe we'll have a rough time for the next several months, but we will come back strong. I have faith in New York because I have faith in New Yorkers and Staten Islanders. We're a tough breed. We fight hard. We love this place. Me, I don't want to go live in a little farmhouse somewhere where there's no people and only cows, as much as I love farmers and cows. So thank you all. Charles, thank you for letting me share a few moments with people. Call us if you need us, folks.
Thank you so much, Senator. Senator, do you have some time for a couple questions, or do you have to run?
I gotta go, but I'll take one question.
One question. Okay, so we have a question from Abraham Kurtzis. So we're gonna unmute him right now.
Hi, Abraham.
Can't hear him.
We can't hear you, Ibrahim. Can you?
Tell him to unmute himself.
You're unmuted here. Now you have to unmute from your PC.
You know what, Charles? Let him submit the question and we'll get an answer to him. How's that?
Okay, not a problem.
Okay. Got one more? Then I got to get running.
I know we have a question from Rose. Rose, you are unmuted in 3 seconds.
Hi, Rose.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So my question has to do with getting federal funding for the MTA. So, you know, right now, the MTA is hurting. They will need an additional $3 billion in addition to what they have received in order to recover from the loss of ridership during the pandemic. Without this federal funding, the MTA will need to institute drastic cuts as well as fare increases. The House has included this money in their CARES Act, but now it's up to the Senate to get this funding to the MTA. Will you fight for this funding during the next round of budget negotiations?
Yes, Rose, absolutely. In fact, I just spoke to the fellow who's the head, Tony, who's the head of Local 100. I don't know if you're a member of Local 100 today. I was the one who got the $4 billion in the first bill. We got $3.9 billion for the MTA. I worked with Speaker Pelosi to make sure that the House bill has the same addition, another $3.9 billion, and we're going to get that. It's in the House bill. We are going to fight very hard in the Senate for it. It's one of my highest priorities. We can't live without the subways. I rode the subway on Sunday. It was great. It was clean. Wasn't that crowded. And I recommend that if you're safe and you feel you can be safe, people go back. But I'm all for getting the money, Rose, and I will fight hard as I can in my own, you'll pardon me since you're from Staten Island, in my own Brooklyn way to get it.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for what you're doing for us at the national level. It's making a big difference, and we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Keep doing the great job you're doing, Charles. Bye, Mike.
Thank you. All right, so let's see, who has a question? Abraham, I know you couldn't ask your question, but we'll definitely make sure we get an answer from you from the Senator's office. So, and Mr. Francis, you have a question. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Francis. Mr. Francis, you are unmuted from our end. You just have to unmute now from your device. Audio. so I guess we'll get back to Mr. Francis. If there's another question, we could take that. Is there another question? I'm gonna read a comment from Facebook. I see Robert Holst posted a comment, and I'll read it. It's important to let working people know where they can go for resources to find out what their employer needs to do to keep them safe on the job. OSHA has refused to issue enforceable standards, and the DC Circuit Court threw the case out. I am aware of city and state protections, but most workers have no clue. Thank you. Thanks. That was a comment. I'm assuming Mr. Holst, right? So, and Casey has a question. Casey, you're on.
Hey, thank you so much. I just had a quick follow-up. I saw a bunch of things on Facebook, and thank you, Jessica Spanton from Diane Savino's office for being so diligent about following up about these things. I've seen a lot of people post about how there's been issues with their ballots, like people got like Republican ballots when they're registered for the Democratic Party or other things like that. I know Senator Savino had posted about this. I was wondering if there was any updates from the BOE or what was going on with that, so we could communicate that with the Young Democrats and other people that were having trouble with their ballot.
Senator, I'll let the senator speak on that. This is the first I'm actually hearing on that, but we will get on the phone with the Board of Elections right now. Thank you for flagging that. But Senator, did you want to chime in on this?
So we had heard from some people that they had requested their absentee ballot and they received a ballot in the mail, except it was for the wrong party. So they were Democrats and they received Republican ballots for, there's an island-wide congressional primary between Nicole Maliotakis and Joe Calderera. And then there, if you live in the 64th Assembly District, there's a Republican primary between Marco Kepi and Michael Chanousis. So obviously they were not their correct ballots. The Board of Elections, we reached out to them. The Board of Elections does not mail out the ballots. They have vendors that do this, and the vendors obviously made a mistake. It was something like a mail merge. So there was a certain batch of them where a mistake was made. What people were instructed to do is immediately call the board, either call 1866 NYC vote, or call the local. If you're here on Staten Island, it's much easier to call the Edgewater Plaza office. Jessica, what's the number? 718, hold on, unmute Jessica. She's gonna text me. We'll give you the number, hold on. If you call them, they will immediately replace your ballot, or people can still vote in person, vote early in person between now and Saturday, or vote in person on Tuesday, or call and they will replace your ballot. But there was about 50 to 75 people that we were made aware of had received the ballot for the wrong party.
I have the number. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? No? Oh, you got, okay. It's 718-876-0079. I'm going to put that in the comments too, but if someone wants to email me as well, that's fine too. I'm going to write it in the chat on the side.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Jessica. I gotta always give my mother a shout out because I see she just joined us. Thank you, Mommy, for joining us. And she did mention that the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union is offering the PPP loans that Senator Charles Schumer just said. So thank you again. I think we got, anybody call us, it's like, but is Charles Rowland has a question. Charles, you're unmuted. Thank you for joining us, Charles.
Hi. Actually, the question I had was about
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me? The question I had was about the, okay. I'm having a lot of trouble here right now. Hold on one second. Okay. The question I had was about the 50% deaf, I'm blocking the whole thing right now. We had Senator Gennardis had put forth a bill regarding relating to the COVID death through the COVID-19. I was trying to find a process of that bill where it would pay a person's family who passed away related to the virus a death benefit. So I was trying to find out where we are in the process of that bill, but I think it might have been passed. And, let me see if I could.
Charles, you were going in and out. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'll get my thought together. I didn't think he was going to call me that quickly.
Charles?
No, I can't pull up the information.
Can you repeat the question?
There was a bill by Senator Gennardis and Jessica. May I go on to another question while I try to pull this information up because I lost it.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, if you could just send us, we'll definitely answer that. And just to read a few comments off of Facebook of folks that want to join but can't. We see Carol Bullock, the Pride Center of Staten Island is here for you. Thank you, Carol, for all you do. Sadia Malik, thank you for joining us. Danny Casella, president of ATU, thank you for the kind words. And Charles Gardner, thank you too for all your kind words. Yes, yes.
All right, so I haven't. So first of all, tell Danny Casella to respond to my text message. I need his email address. Number one. Okay. Number two, in answer to Charles's question, he's asking about the line of duty death benefit bill that we passed when we were in Albany just 2 weeks ago. Yes, so yes, we did pass it. It was signed into law by the governor that would provide a line of duty death benefit to those who passed away as a result of COVID-19. It would provide a benefit for their family and lifetime health insurance for their family members.
Thank you, Senator. And also the one thing I would like to add to that, we definitely have definitely more work to do on that front because, government was basically telling supermarket workers, they're essential workers, so they have to be at work. And many folks did pass away as supermarket workers and other jobs that were considered essential workers, and so we definitely have to go back and, include those folks that did die, as a result of COVID as being an essential worker. I know it's going to be a heavy lift, but I do know that's something that is on our radar. We're going to work very hard to do that. And Danny Casella, Senator Savino said to please answer her text message. I have a question from. We have a question from Francis James. I think he can't unmute himself, so we will read it.
State government is concerned about mass eviction, hence the stop to all eviction proceedings until, I believe, August. This is deferring an inevitable crisis without providing adequate help to tenants who will ultimately be evicted once the courts open. What additional help is being available to tenants so their landlords will eventually be paid?
Okay, I hope you guys heard that question, but what we did, I mentioned this earlier, we did put $100 million, and look, this it was a step in the right direction, and of course there's more work to do here, but part of that effort there was to help those that are at risk of being evicted during this period, and for more information on that, if you know somebody that is at risk of being evicted, or that's hurting from COVID financially, please reach out to our office. We'll definitely send you the information needed so you can share it with that individual that may be in need. And Mr. Francis will definitely get you that information as well personally right after the town hall. That's a question. Oh, Diane? Oh, Diane has a question. I'm sorry, Diane, did you want to say something? Because I see in the chat room it says to unmute Diane. Are you good? Okay. All right. Oh, so, okay. Let's see. Questions. I think Nita has a question.
Oh, no, I think he's clapping.
Yes. Nancy, you are unmuted. I know Ibrahim had a question on if there was any work on a state level to extend income tax filings. Assemblymember Cusick, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was a executive order where the governor did extend income tax filings, or was there a bill? I don't recall that, but let me, Ibrahim, if we can't get an answer now, we'll definitely follow up. But Assemblymember Cusick, would you happen to know if we did extend income tax filing? I can't recall off the top of my head.
Well, the tax filing has been extended to July 15th. And currently I know that our congressman has been out there asking that it be further extended to October 15th because, you know, the pandemic has lasted longer than I think people had thought. So he's pushing for October, I believe, but currently taxes will be due July 15th. And that's extended, of course, from April 15th.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm back again. Assemblyman, I'm back again. Nitya Chatterjee. Can I?
Welcome back.
Thanks a lot. I did unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Very nice. Thank you. This is a question for Senator Diane Savino. I was wondering if she could just throw some light on this. This is an Assembly Bill 10401 by Simotas, and in the Senate it's 8266 Ramos. It's about the New York State Public Employees Federation requesting support for this bill. The bill would amend the workers' compensation law as it relates to including COVID-19 as an occupational disease. This law would ensure that essential employees who came into contact with the virus are eligible for workers' comp. Now, would you be able to comment on that?
I only know the bill was introduced when we went up to the late May session. There's not agreement yet on how to fund it. That's why it didn't move. So we did the line of duty death benefit first.
Right.
There's still a lot of concern about the potential cost on making this a workers' compensation case. So it's still in negotiations.
Oh, I guess the budget will really get kicked up a lot if it is. Okay, yeah. I see it. Can I ask you one more question? If the feds don't really come out to help the state with regard to the funds and the deficit, would you be foreseeing some layoffs or incentives retire?
On the state side, it is highly unlikely we would be looking at either layoffs or a retirement for two reasons. One, because we're already under headcount on the state side. We don't have an excess of headcount. And so it doesn't make sense to encourage people to retire because we need the staff. The city's in a very different position. The city headcount is, the city's actually hired several thousand people in the past 6.5 years. So they may be in a different place. The biggest problem if we don't get funding from Washington to
Effects.
help us deal with the crisis is we could be looking at serious cuts to programs, which would be devastating. Because as you know, you've been in state government a long time, it's
Yes.
always the populations that need the funding the most, that can withstand it the least, you know,
Right.
and so we have to, you know, we just have to keep the pressure on Washington that we can't afford this devastation. They're gonna have to help us.
And you would
We
not
need
like,
it.
yeah,
Right.
I see what you mean. You don't want to see more people unemployed. That's true.
Right, exactly.
Okay. It's
Thank
very
you.
nice. Thanks an awful lot. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Senator. Do we have any other questions? Could raise your hand. Any comments? We got a comment on Facebook from DB Wetman. Hi from Makerspace NYC. Great to see all of you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for joining us, DB. Ed Williams, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Assemblyman Paul. So my question, and I'm asking this question, of course, under the assumption that the elected official is working in the interest of their constituents. So I know the current climate we're in, COVID-19, George Floyd, a lot of these matters that we're all kind of feeling the pressure of. I'm wondering, however, if there are any issues or areas of concerns that from your level, your experience, that we should possibly be focusing on that we might not necessarily be putting any energy or time toward right now to effectively help with some of the, the things that we're dealing with in the community. So are there any issues or areas of concerns that you think we should possibly put more time and energy into looking at right now as well?
Absolutely. So thank you for that question. I know, we mentioned this earlier, but one of the biggest things as a result of all the peaceful protests that we've seen across the city and especially on Staten Island, we want to give a really big shout out to the young leaders of Staten Island for organizing a peaceful protest and working with the police department to ensure that things go smoothly. But to have like almost 2,000 people come out and speak for the necessary importance of change is significant, especially here in our borough. And and part of their efforts has to do with all the reforms that we did in the last week. And those reforms are a step in the right directions, and there is still more work to do. And one of the things I've been encouraging folks to do on social media is to really familiarize yourselves. So if we can have all this reform about on police community relations, why can't we have the same reform when it comes to the budget process, right? If there is so I think that's a very important and significant component here. Like the city's budget is about $90 billion, the state's budget is about $180 billion, right? Yes, we're up in Albany advocating constantly for our districts and our community, but I think it's a fair question that, you folks should ask, how come there isn't a bigger percentage of the budget that the community can decide where the funding goes to, right? So we're already seeing it with with police reform, so why can't we see it from a financial standpoint? So that's one of the things I've been trying to do my best to connect the dots on, and do everything I can with my colleagues to make sure we're delivering on that end for Staten Island. But that's what I would say to that. Thank you for that question. Is there any other questions? Facebook. Two questions, okay. So from Stephanie Ward on Facebook, are there any current talks happening at the state level pushing for ultra millionaires taxes to provide more funds to help the budget? And then the second question was, it's my understanding, or second point was, it's my understanding There are some bills relating to this, but unsure of your positions on those funding bills. So yes, I know there have been a number of conversations about pushing the ultra millionaires tax, and I believe there is a good amount of support for it. You know, obviously the last 2 times we went up to Albany, it was solely focused on COVID-related packages, and then the next week was really focused on police reform packages. But I will definitely keep you posted if this is something that will be on the agenda, but I do know there have been conversations on the ultra millionaires tax. And also I'll add to that, the only thing I'll add to that is, you know, if we don't get any funding from the federal government to help us out with our deficit, this is one of those options we're gonna have to definitely take a look at, because we will have to find a way to address the deficit. So hear you loud and clear, and thank you for that. And good to see you, Principal Louis Bruschke, representing IS 49. That was a comment on Facebook. Any other questions? Diverse, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Mohan has a question where you will be unmuted in less than 5 seconds. You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Judge, Assemblyman, and Senator, and all others, our Senator Chuck Schumer, Mike Cusick, Assemblyman, and thank you all for joining us, being part of this town hall meeting. I just have a quick question. I'm from Public Employees Federation, and a lot of our members are concerned if there are any fear of layoffs. They would like to take out the early retirement option and any other measures that we were told. I put the date on the bill, Assembly Bill 10595, dated June 5th. There is an Assembly bill to offer buyouts for the state employees. Is that true? Is it?
No.
Okay.
So Mohan, I just addressed this with Dr. Chatterjee. So that bill was introduced by Tom Abernathy in Westchester, because Westchester is dealing with some problems, and he thought it would be a good idea. So first and foremost, we don't have an excess of headcount in the state workforce. The state is actually under headcount in every agency. They are not looking to lose employees because they're short-staffed in every agency. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's no money to offer people an incentive to leave. The city is in a different position. There is a distinct possibility that the city of New York may be looking to do an early retirement incentive to prevent layoffs, or even a severance retirement like was done in 1995. But for the state, and I've had discussions with the state and with CSEA and PEF, there is no incentive coming because there's no reason to entice people to leave. We cannot afford to lose state employees.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Diverse, you're on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for attending the press conference.
All right, I appreciate being on. I apologize for being late. I was working. I don't know everything that was discussed today, but the question I have is more around these reforms that we're looking at right now, these new NYPD police reforms. One of my questions, it's a two-part question. One is, do we think we can actually have real reform in New York City, or do you believe that we're going to have genuine, real reform in New York City with regard to the NYPD while Patrick Lynch is still a PBA president? I just don't see that panning out the same way, working out in everyone's favor with him still being in the position that he's in. And number two is, I just did some research recently to find out how much, when we talk about people being laid off, or you're talking about maybe incentivizing people around early retirement because we can't afford to lose state workers or what have you, I look at the balloon police retirement budgets, and I started to do some homework, and there was some reports about how those things are working and how police retirement is kind of guaranteed by the city and the state, even when the police don't have the funding there. So I'm just wondering, how can we actually have real police reform with a lot of those staples still being in place, and the fact that the NYPD makes more money operating as is. And with that PBA president, I don't see how much cultural difference is going to happen within the PD. Again, chokehold's been illegal, but it doesn't stop them from doing it. A lot of the tactics that we're complaining about are already banned tactics, but they still use them. The issue is, can we enforce anything against police? These are the real issues, and that's what I'm saying. Like, these reforms, they seem like they keep asking the public to have faith that they're going to do the right thing when they have a history of not doing the right thing. So I'm just asking you, as our elected body, what are we really looking at when we're talking about police reform in New York City while Patrick Lynch still sits in the same position?
Thank you for that question, Divers. I think, when it comes to what we did in Albany last week was significant, right? So the fact that if an officer was to use a chokehold on somebody moving forward, they now will be held criminally liable for that, and I think it makes them think twice on using that tactic, And as far as, whether, Pat Lynch is the president of the union or not, the people's voice is speaking loud and clear. And it's because of the people's voice we saw the reforms that we did last week. And it just doesn't stop there, and it is an ongoing conversation. It's an ongoing work. And that's why, I'm encouraging that the pressure still remains on. Like, the iron is hot right now, and we got to keep the iron hot. And, not only demand that we have the reforms that we have seen, but that there are more reforms, and that also that the state and city budget is reflective of what our communities need, what our nonprofits need. You see a lot of work that Empowerment Zone is doing, or Island Voice, like it's, and even your organization, right? We got to make sure that you guys are well off. And now connecting those reforms to what those folks that are doing grassroots organizations are doing at the ground is very important and key. And I believe that we'll definitely see some more reform down the road.
Well, in closing, I would just say, and I would like to hear, especially from somebody like Diane. Diane's a firebrand. I would like to hear somebody else's thoughts. But following Keisha Lance Bottom's example, I think that's one of the best examples of how to move forward. Because again, like I said at that podium that day, at the mayoral level is where the chief of police and local police policy is really formulated. And having that ability to take executive orders and put certain things in place and not have to go through. There's certain things that shouldn't even have to go through Albany, right? It's certain decisions and powers that he has that he can make on his own. So what I'd like to see, and again, I thank you guys for having me, and I thank you for the ability to have this forum, is that when we do things like this, that it turns out a genuine outcome, as opposed to saying we did it, but we're still in the same place. But we all came together and we still in the same spot. That is something that I want to see different, because that's how we arrived here at kind of, never really addressing it, but acting like we were. So I thank you, Charles, for inviting me. And I thank everybody on this call today. I've been examining who's here. And I just hope that that we can get some things done, and it's not just policies and politics as usual, because we're kind of tired of that.
Darius, I actually want to respond, because you're right. Look, I've known Pat Lynch a very long time. He and I came up in the labor movement together, and I don't always agree with his rhetoric, and I sometimes try and understand, like, he feels he has to defend his members, and it doesn't. It sometimes seems to be completely tone deaf to what's happening in the world. But if change is going to come in the PBA, it's got to come from within the membership. The NYPD now is a majority minority workforce. 68% of the NYPD is now a minority workforce. The members of the NYPD, those members, the rank and file, have got to come forward and say, this is not how we want to be seen. This is not the way we want the public to view us, as an oppressor. We want to have a different kind of relationship. And I don't know how that happens. I really don't. But they're going to have to step forward. You see the community affairs officers we have on Staten Island. You can see on their face that this breaks their heart. They put their efforts into trying to develop community police relations, and you can see that this really hurts them. They have to step forward. They're going to have to take leadership positions within the PBA and say that we want to do things differently, but that's going to take some time. But you're absolutely right. People hear the rhetoric and they don't believe that change is going to come. We can only do so much through the legislative process. So yeah, we took what was banned by the department and we made it a crime. So people will be held accountable. But we're going to see a situation where a cop's going to get jammed up, he's going to get arrested, and he's going to be on the job for 4 or 5 years while it takes that long for his case to go forward. And people are going to be frustrated and they're going to say, why? Why is he still on the job? Because the criminal case takes precedence over the department case. That's what drags things on. And people don't get it. They just see justice delayed. And justice delayed often means justice denied. And we got to find a way to solve that problem. I don't know what it is. But we need to keep talking and we need to keep shining a light. And more importantly, we need to find, rank and file members of the NYPD who are members of the communities of color to take a rightful role in their union and start to change the discussion and the dynamic there.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'll just add on to Charles and Diane. The short answer to your question is there's certainly going to be more after this. We've seen it in Albany. Individual legislators are talking about more reforms. There's many bills that were out there that we didn't get to this time around. And to Charles's point, these peaceful protests have really worked. And so I do think that there is going to be more reform as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator and Assemblymember. Thank you for that question, Diverse. Is there any questions? I know we have a few more minutes. We're going till 7. If you have a question but you didn't want to ask us on this forum, my team is always available. I'm always available as well, and we have our emails in the group chat. I'm sorry? A chat question. Let's see, what's the question? When does the toll freeze end? The toll freeze. So the toll freeze, my understanding is we got it for 2 years when we voted on it last year. And so I'm sure gonna have that fight again next year when it's up again. Yep. So I know as a unit, we've been fighting very hard to make sure that the freeze stays in place. Even when the Port Authority was trying to raise the 3-trip threshold to 10, we pushed back hard on that, and we were successful in making sure it stays at 3. So that I know that again we're going to be dealing with that again next year, but please stay tuned for that, and we're going to work very hard. Look, we're all Staten Islanders here, so trust me, nobody wants to be paying more tolls here. So I hear you loud and clear when it comes to that. I didn't know if anybody else wanted to chime in on that one.
No, Charles, you're right. The negotiation for this year, for last year, was to the end of till next year's budget. So yes, it will be taken up. But unfortunately, because of the situation we're in with COVID, it's a little more fluid than past years. And I know that there was a fund that was created in last year's budget that would go to individual communities for things like what we get for our discount for the bridge that has been discontinued a couple of weeks ago. The Verrazano Bridge discount program that our team has negotiated over the years was held harmless to this point, but the overarching issue is always going to be if we get funding from the federal government going forward for this year, and then ultimately if the MTA has money, because not only does the state legislature subsidize, so does the MTA. So yes, short answer is what Charles had said, that it is up next year. We will have to try to get it back in the budget, and it's currently at $5.50 for Staten Island residents who have Easy Pass.
Thank you, Assemblymember. So yeah, all right. So now we're the time is up, but again, if you had a question you didn't want to ask, please let us know. I see there was a comment about the funding NYPD. I do want to address that. So when you hear the funding NYPD, I believe the speaker spoke to that earlier. When you hear the funding, it almost seems like you want to completely eliminate all the funds on the police department, right? And if you think about where we are in New York City, we're a #1 target, period. We saw what happened on 9/11. We saw what happened when that truck drove through those innocent people on the West Side Highway. So there has to be a level of security there. So I think there has to also be a shift in resources for our nonprofits and our community organizations, as we mentioned before. And so I think that's where we go from there. I recognize it's going to be a lot of work, but the more the community raises its voice, the more action you will see, like you have seen in the last week. So I guess with that being said, I want to thank Senator Savino, Assemblymember Michael Cusick, for providing some really good insight on matters that many of you raised, and for joining us as well. There's a lot of work to do and a lot of work to be done, and there's a long road ahead of us. But when our community is working together, we will get it done, especially here on Staten Island. If we did not get around, like I said earlier, to your question, please feel free to email my team and I, and we will get back to you shortly. The chat room has everybody's email that's on my staff. Again, thank you so much for joining us for these 2 hours, and I'll see you soon. And please stay safe, and keep in mind we still have a lot of PPEs. We have hand sanitizers, and we also have masks, and looking forward to doing more work. And I'll also, I don't know if Assemblymember Cusick, you want to say any closing remarks, or Diane, if you want to say any closing remarks, or we could.
Well, I just want to thank you, Charles. Thanks, Charles, for putting this together. This has been a great for all of us, because as I've always said, we can't legislate without listening. And people in our districts are the experts on all the issues that we need to address. So this is a very important tool, a very important event that you put together. And I appreciate all the folks who spent tonight with us tonight. Thank you so much.
What he said. Thank you, Charles, and your staff for putting this together. And of course, we want to say thank you to Assemblyman Heastie, the Speaker, and of course, Senator Chuck Schumer, from taking some time away from his very busy schedule to join us here, and everyone for participating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. And don't forget about the census.
Right, fill out the census.